Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this first talk of the day in this tech series, a series of talks. My name is Richard Denny. I'm a business developer in BP's hydrogen team working across Northwest Europe. I want to talk to you this morning for about 15 minutes on our concept development project for looking at green ammonia imports into Wilhelmshaven and northwestern Germany. So I'm going to cover a few different areas. I just want to give you a little bit of a BP overview to begin with, just some of our hydrogen activities, and then into why we've selected this location in particular, the idea of cracking ammonia into hydrogen, what we're looking at for this project specifically in the region in northern Germany, and then a little bit on the wider context about why we think this project in this location is important. So I'm just going to skip over the disclaimer. So I think you're all probably well aware of BP as a company and its ambitions to be a net zero company by 2050 or sooner, and hydrogen forms a very important part of that discussion. It's one of our growth engines, and it's something BP is focusing on a lot globally. How that's going to fit into our current activities, I just want to make the point that BP is actively pursuing more than 10 hydrogen projects globally at the moment. We're growing a project hopper across the globe, which includes from production, midstream projects like this one, and developing relationships with customers globally. We're targeting 500,000 to 700,000 tons of production by 2030, so it's not a small ambition by any means. And our approach is really based around sort of three pillars. The first one is to look at captured demand from our incumbent refineries and replacing that grey hydrogen with green where possible, and perhaps blue with intermediate solutions, developing that out to regions, supplying key industrial off-takers where we can, to ultimately where hydrogen can be used in what we hope will be a liquid market, in many ways like the gas market is today. So this will be based around what will become, we hope, global export hubs. And so where that activity, we believe, is going to take place, some of those locations globally that we're looking at. So I think there's a large Australian presence here today, and you may well be aware that we've got two big projects there. In Western Australia, looking at exporting hydrogen in the best form possible and most likely ammonia. We've got projects across Oman, the Middle East, the west coast of the Gulf Coast of the US, and into ultimately northwestern Europe, where we see there being key demand centers which we want to serve, and want to do that in the best way that we see possible. So a global presence of developing production projects. We're looking at the best means of transporting that to the key demand regions that we see developing across the world, but specifically in northwestern Europe. And so when we look at northwestern Europe, and you think of Germany in particular, it's a market that has a legacy and a great history of industrial development since the Second World War, where you've got centers like North Rhine-Westphalia of very significant energy consumption, big industrial consumers, steel makers, cement producers, petrochemicals plants and the like. And ultimately, if this heavy industry is going to be replacing its incumbent fossil sources with a clean burning alternative, hydrogen is the answer to that. But what does that mean in terms of energy? It's very significant, potentially 200 terawatt hours worth of energy that needs to be replaced. And that is no easy or mean feat to achieve. And if we're going to do that using hydrogen, there are obviously a lot of projects announced, native projects on the continent itself. But when you add all those up, you're still in a net deficit. And we need to bridge that deficit somehow. And therefore, the only way you're going to do that is by importing the hydrogen. And that ultimately leads us to considering an import option for northwestern Europe. We're in Rotterdam today, and Rotterdam is a very important location for considering that. We also want to consider if there is an option elsewhere in Europe, and we looked at German ports. And so before we go to the ports itself, we thought, well, how do we transport this hydrogen? And I think a lot of you are aware of different vectors of hydrogen, options that we consider. Liquefying the hydrogen itself, you preserve its purity. Obviously, that has a great benefit if you're then just going to be able to use it straight away. But liquefying hydrogen is extremely costly in terms of energy. You have to chill it to almost absolute zero, which leads to large boil-off losses. And it's a problem that we're looking to tackle and improve if we can, but it's an immature technology. Together with other options like liquefied organic hydrogen carriers, which are in development, and it pose some interesting potential options to consider for the future, and something that we will also consider. But today we're addressing ammonia. It's a mature chemical which has been used widely in fertilizers and agricultural production for a long, long time. We're considering here it for its uses that you can use it to bind to the hydrogen molecule and keep it liquid at only -33, which is far more convenient. Carriers exist globally to transport it, so it's something that we can consider using within a relatively short period of time. So ammonia is what we've taken for this concept. And what do we see? So ammonia being used as the vector, bringing hydrogen to Wilhelmshaven in northern Germany. And we see this import terminal being really a cornerstone piece of infrastructure in northern Germany, where we can hopefully build an end-to-end solution from some of those production hubs I highlighted globally, with taking advantage of BP's legacy in trading and shipping, to bring that ammonia to the port, and to the NWO terminal in Wilhelmshaven, where BP's had a long-standing interest in the oil facilities that are there today. So we're developing these options across the value chain. And I just want to make the point here on this slide that BP really offers this level of vertical integration across this value chain, which perhaps others don't have access to, or the history in that BP has. So, as I say, we've got planned production projects in places like Australia, shipping that ammonia, not necessarily from Australia, but it is conceivable, to northern Germany, cracking that ammonia back to gaseous hydrogen and delivering it to customers via pipeline networks, be that repurposed natural gas or crude pipelines, or new build dedicated hydrogen service. All of these options are being looked into. And I just want to say a little bit on this slide about the NWO terminal itself in Wilhelmshaven and why we've chosen this location. And it really is about this site. It's very interesting for a number of perspectives. You can see on this image on the bottom left-hand corner of the slide, there's a lot of land available. BP is a majority shareholder in the NWO terminal joint venture, together with Shell and a company called Holborn. It's got this very long legacy. Since 1958, been in operation, a great operational team there. They've been working tirelessly to develop new business opportunities where possible, and they see this hopefully as being in the vanguard of that effort of creating what could become an ecosystem of new energy projects around the Wilhelmshaven area. It's the only deep water port in northern Germany, and poses, therefore, the real potential in bringing large-scale imports to the country, and ultimately then to Europe and beyond. And I'll come back to the wider context in a little bit. So, as I say, great site for us to explore, a lot of land available, great operational team in place who are working collaboratively with us to explore how we can convert jetties for use in ammonia instead of crude, where ammonia storage could be sited safely. It's obviously a toxic product that we need to consider very carefully when we are thinking about areas of population, how it will be moved and transported, even if only a very short distance here between jetties and around these facilities. How big the cracking facilities may need to be, this I'll come to in a second, and how you may then inject this into a pipeline network for onward delivery to customers. So the project itself, we're in a pre-feasibility concept design study phase. But like I say, we've just got this, and the concept hopefully I've outlined here, you see on the top right of the slide, whereby you've got the ammonia import, the cryogenic ammonia storage facilities. They will conceivably be very large, 50,000 tons or more. The ammonia cracking, there are several companies, technology vendors out there who are looking into the technology. I'm sure some of you are in the audience here today, or you will be able to speak to them. a lot of interesting concepts, a lot of them based around steam methane reforming reformer type technologies, and awesome some esoteric options out there also to consider. We're considering them all, and whether we can get the efficiencies that we want out of the scale that we want. Our base case is to look at about 130,000 tons a year of hydrogen, and therefore from that, about 700, 800,000 tons of ammonia to be brought to the site. But this is in development, could change, could get a bit bigger. We'll see how it evolves. But ultimately, this study is focusing on the site, as I say, looking at the technology primarily, then timeline, whether that can be installed by our ambitions of getting something in place before 2030. We're looking at 2028 at a best case if we can. So we've got safety studies ongoing. We've got a primary engineering contractor onboarded and working closely with the NWO team at site. Specifically, storage is a key work stream for us around large-scale ammonia and some smaller-scale hydrogen, which will be necessary to provide some buffer before injection into the pipeline network. Optimal site design and supporting infrastructure requirements is an interesting aspect of this because there are, as I said, other green and renewable energy projects in the area, and seeking power for this type of project is going to be key, integrating with local utilities and these other projects. It poses some interesting questions for this project specifically and how to optimize and the engineering and how you do that, but also can we make the best of this location with others to really build out an ecosystem of new energy projects for the Wilhelmshaven area so that it becomes important for Germany and Europe as a whole. So our deliverables that we're looking at having by the end of this year are going to be around cost and schedule, which are going to feed into us really understanding in detail the feasibility of this project and then hopefully moving it forward into next year into a more detailed optimized phase. And we're interested in conversations with others about how we can best do this around this site. If you're here today from one of the other companies working in Wilhelmshaven, keen to talk to you. Like I say, our plans at the moment for this project, looking for a concept design study phase to end towards the end of this year, move into pre-feed and engineering studies next year, and then ultimately, can we have start of operations by 2028? That's our ambition. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the wider context here. I've got a couple of minutes left. So you might have seen in the press, letters of intent have been signed with other TSOs and other companies who are planning projects in the Wilhelmshaven area to develop wider pipeline systems away. And we see really the opportunity here for two key pipeline trunk lines, if you like, to develop from Wilhelmshaven in the north and Rotterdam, so going east-west, Wilhelmshaven north-south, to reach these key demand centers of industrial Germany. So you've got this triangle, if you like, off which you can have branches of hydrogen pipelines reaching smaller demand areas away from these key nodes that we foresee really supplanting their fossil fuel use and replacing it with hydrogen from 2030 onwards and later into the 2040s and 2050s. As I say, named on here a few of the other key players who we're in conversation with about developing this wider infrastructure projects across Northwest Europe, with Wilhelmshaven being that key import node, together with a place like Rotterdam, where you're probably well aware that there are also import terminals proposed, together with these, and I've mentioned on this slide here, the Delta Rhine corridor as a key pipeline project, and what we believe will be another key pipeline project, what we're calling the NWO corridor, repurposing some of the existing NWO pipeline network from Wilhelmshaven south, together working closely with the other TSOs, Gasunie, ThyssenGas, Novega, towards some of these other areas such as Salzgitter, and then ultimately North Rhine-Westphalia, which I've mentioned before. I've only got 10 seconds left to close this talk, so just in summary, if I can move the slide on. This site's going to be great for potentially an ecosystem, like I say. Significant investment will be needed to deliver it, but there is this infrastructure. There are the ships available to transport ammonia today. We hope in the future there will be ammonia vessels powered by ammonia available for transport. About 130,000 tons we're targeting of hydrogen. And that's going to serve ultimately what we believe will be very significant hydrogen demand across Northwest Europe. So great to talk to you about the ecosystem that's developing around Wilhelmshaven and Northwest Europe as a whole. Thank you for listening.